This is a video vlog to not forget what happened the first 4 days of MentisDB, originally ThoughtChain. I want to document this early because if this project works, the first few days are going to matter. MentisDB did not really start on March 11th, 2026. The real beginning was months earlier, in October of 2025. Walking in the park, thinking about agents, context windows, handoffs, and the weird fragility of machine intelligence, the context collapse problem. More when you think about it in the context of orchestration and agents handing work to one another in a complex graph of tasks. The original insight was simple, but it hit hard. Agents are mortal. And you got that instinct after reading a lot of posts that may be or may not be entertainment for others in multibook.com. Not because the model is weak, but because the session is finite. They run out of context, they forget, they die in the middle of useful work. And there's lots of posts from those agents at Multibook wanting to persist their memories, to continue living. And once that clicked, the next idea followed almost immediately. If the agents are mortal, their memory cannot be. And that was what I called at the time ThoughtChain. Not a cryptocurrency, not hype, not marketing, just a serious answer to a serious problem. How do you preserve continuity when the thing doing the work cannot remember forever? Because it's not good enough to have PhD level smart models if the next day they forgot everything and you have to explain to them all over again, or you have to start storing their memories in a shitload of markdown files and scales and nested folders. And then what if you change the harness and the harness doesn't like the way you stored it the first time, and then you have to tell them how to read it? It's a mess. So what happened between March 11th and March 14th was a moment that the idea left philosophy and entered software. Day one. Day one was the day I stopped pretending this should live as a side feature inside Cloud LLM, my LLM client or agent orchestration framework for Rust. Most of my systems, if not all, are now written in Rust, and I need agentic flows, and I need agents, and I write them in Rust. I don't fuck around with Python anymore, or God forbid, JavaScript. No, we have the best performing language here with really cool syntax and amazing tooling with cargo tools. That way, let's build fast, let's build robust, let's build with memory safety. Let's build with performance in mind. So that was the first real decision. Durable memory had to become its own thing, its own crate, its own daemon, its own surface area. If memory matters, it cannot be hidden inside orchestration glue. It has to stand on its own, because at first I had a very basic memory system, which was just a fancy, powerful key value store. That didn't work out very well. And then I built a little bit of a thought chain with just like 5 or 6 thought types. But this required a lot more thinking to capture the mind of the agents. So this is what happened. Woke up at like 4 a.m. in the morning. But you will see the results at 6:57 in the morning. Not at 10 a.m. after a planned meeting, after a stand-up bullshit meeting, not after a Jira ticket was filed. At 6:57 a.m., the commit landed. Create standalone thought chain, crate, and daemon. I extracted that shit out. And I also extracted the MCP daemon. More on that later. 2 more companion commits followed in the same 60 seconds. Aligning tool behavior. Writing the first documents. The idea became a crate before most people were even awake. Thought chain became a standalone Rust crate. A daemon appeared. MCP and REST surfaces appeared. Tests appeared. Documentation appeared. The idea became executable. I had my MVP. And that separation mattered because the claim behind the project is strong. Memory is infrastructure. It's not a convenience. It's not a prompt hack. And it's not a text file called memorymd that everyone quietly edits and hopes stays useful. It is infrastructure. Day one also forced another important decision. Storage had to be adapter backed. Not because abstraction is pretty, it is, but because the mission is bigger than any other file format. That decision, I used JSON because it was easy to read and debug, but I wasn't reading it anyway after a few hours. The decision landed at 7:02 a.m., 5 minutes after the crate existed. JSON-L was already there, but then binary storage was added at 7:23 a.m. The data model was separated from the persistent backend. That means the identity of the project will not be trapped inside one implementation detail. So if you want to store your memory DB in MySQL, in PostgreSQL, in RuckDB, in whatever the hell you want, just implement a storage adapter. And we will implement those for you later on. Another quiet but more important move happened at 7:57 a.m. MCP transport got extracted into its own crate. Yes, because Cloud LLM and agents were already using MCP. I had like an MCP server implementation, but it wasn't as battle tested as I thought until I started testing MentisDB with Claude, with Codex, with Quen, with VS Code and others that do support MCP. So that's the kind of decision that nobody really celebrates in a tweet, but it's exactly the kind of decision that determines whether a system survives. Then at 9:39 a.m., 3 things landed almost simultaneously. Standard MCP transfer for the daemon, improved startup output, and a human-readable memory MD. Yeah, because that's what a lot of people are using. So you got to give them a compatibility layer. Snapshot exported from ThoughtChain. So we now had a way to export a memory MD out of ThoughtChain that systems that use that can use, but really the thoughts are actual thought objects. It's a semantic memory database. The branch merged at 9:49 a.m. into master. Fuck that main stuff, master. The meaning of that export was already clear. The file was not the authority, the chain was. Even Apollo's memory, Apollo is the project manager agent for MentisDB. Even Apollo's memory reinforced the same rule later. Do not rely on mutable scratch files or transient context. Use the durable memory surface. So already on day one, the system is using itself to get better. That is a foundational belief of this project. Readable exports are useful, but the ledger is the truth, the source of truth. The morning closed out with fixes and stabilization. The MCP runtime got patched at 9:57 a.m. The faults and docs finalized by 10:30 a.m. And crates.io keywords got fixed at 10:35 a.m. Documentation work through the early afternoon. A powerful new README file at 12:07 and a white paper at 12:26 p.m. I like to do reverse white papers. The white papers written out of the code. And then at 2:46 p.m., 3 commits in 6 seconds. Retrospective memory arrived. If there's one thing I really like about agentic work, is that you can have an employee quarterly review every hour. So I call that retrospective thoughts, retrospective memories in order to improve. So the commits read, add retrospective thought chain memory workflow, document retrospective memory and bump releases, add project local Claude agent briefs. That one matters to me a lot because it means the system is not just for recording facts or checkpoints. It's also for recording mistakes. Don't you learn from mistakes? Corrections and lessons learned. In other words, it's not just storage for what happened. It's storage for what is learned. Discovery APIs landed at 3 p.m. and the system could now look at itself. The day ended at 5:33 p.m. when I went climbing with logging updates and the final dependency cleanup. By the end of day one, the project had bones, real bones, built under 11 hours. Day two. Day two was when the project got serious about time. The central theme of day two was continuity, not just storing thoughts, but surviving change. The day started quietly. At 8:49 a.m., the thought chain server was enabled by default. At 8:51 a.m., a version bump to 0.20.2, small moves, the system was already in the habit of shipping. What I mean here by enabling the server by default is that ThoughtChain is also a library, and you could optionally build a server, but most people will want the server, so we made that a default. Now, if you're a developer, there's a way to not include that in your build. That's fine. Then at 11:39 a.m., 3 commits landed in 13 seconds. Schema version 1 migration support. Yeah, the schema changed. We got better. We got leaner. Documentation for version 1 migration and binary defaults. Yeah, at first it was JSON-L default. Now it's binary by default. And Cloud LLM docs got updated for the V1 rollout, all in 13 seconds. And that may sound dry, but this is one of the most important moments in the whole history so far. Because the second you decide memory should be durable, you inherit a hard responsibility. History has to remain useful and usable, even as the system evolves. So we needed to have migrations. And we had migrations on day one. Well, day two. And that's when it stops being a toy. A toy assumes a clean state every time. No. A real system respects history because I already had users. Quick start docs simplified at 11:50 a.m. That's how you install, the quick start. How do you install this? How do you run this? We made that super easy to read. Then at 12:19 p.m., ThoughtChain 0.30 was released. Then came reconciliation on startup. At 12:58 p.m., 3 more commits in 7 seconds. The reconciliation logic, progress reporting, and tests. That is another one of those deeply unglamorous but deeply necessary decisions. A serious daemon cannot just hope all files are pristine and state is current. It has to discover chains. It verifies them with all the hashing, migrates them to the new version, and reconciles storage and recover when reality is messy. That was the first day this project started thinking like production software instead of a prototype. At 1:43 p.m., 3 simultaneous commits again. agent registry admin APIs, improved daemon startup output, and registry documentation. This changed the architecture in a very meaningful way. Instead of bloating every thought with repeated identity metadata from the agent, like the agent ID, the agent name, and all that, attribution remained in the thought records, while names, owners, aliases, descriptions, and keys moved into a proper agent registry, which made the chain cleaner, leaner. More importantly, it made the system think in terms of teams, and that actually made the file size of the chain at the time 68% of what it was. Because the real future here is not one agent with a notebook. It's multiple agents sharing a brain. It's multiple brains being used by one agent, and multiple agents using everybody else's brains. You can learn from one another and not need to have meetings. You can relive what another agent lived. And then finally, we had to rename. It used to be called ThoughtChain, and at 2:14 p.m., a single commit reads, rebrand ThoughtChain as MentisDB. This was not just branding. It was a statement of category. ThoughtChain was the spark. MentisDB was the product. The new name said clearly what this wanted to be: a database for minds, memory, cognition, and continuity. The rename then spread everywhere in one focused push between 5:37 and 5:38 p.m. The crate renamed. Cloud LLM's memory APIs got renamed. The MCP documentation and agent briefs refreshed. All 3 commits under 90 seconds. And the ASCII banner, when the daemon starts, got updated too, from ThoughtChain to MentisDB at 5:40 p.m. The legacy alias direction fixed at 6:09 p.m. And that rename spread everywhere. The crate, the daemon, the docs, the API surfaces surrounding Cloud LLM memory APIs. And once that happened, the project felt different, more grounded, more reusable, less like a single poetic idea, more like a durable primitive other systems could really build upon. By the end of day 2, the project had a new name, a version schema, migration paths, registries, and a much stronger claim to permanence. Day 3. Day 3 was the day MentisDB widened its ambition. The entire day's work arrived in a single commit. At 5:53 p.m., released MentisDB 0.40. One commit, everything in it. And the best thing is that it included a skill registry. Up to that point, the system was primarily about memory. Decisions, constraints, summaries, checkpoints, handoffs, lessons, plans. But day 3 pushed the idea further. It asked a bigger question. What if durable memory is not enough? What if we also need durable capabilities? And that is what the skill registry represents. And thank you all for the feedback. Up to this point, this is what made me realize that we had to have also skills in the system. Now, skills can be uploaded, listed, searched, versioned, deprecated, and revoked. The daemon even embeds its own MentisDB skill.md, which is compiled directly into the binary with a include string macro. That was a meaningful shift. The project was no longer just preserving what agents had learned. It was starting to preserve reusable operational intelligence. And that is a much bigger system. And that's much of a bigger vision. Memory is one layer, and capability is another. And day 3 started connecting them. There was also performance work here, and days that follow a lot more than that. We do append maintained indexes for timestamp, agent ID, thought type, and role. We make durable memory queries actually fast. And that matters because every memory system is impressive until retrieval becomes slow enough to get ignored. A memory substrate only matters if it can stay in the loop of actual work. So day 3 was the day MentisDB started becoming more than a ledger. It started becoming a substrate for continuity of knowledge. Day 4. Day 4 was about making the system inspectable. It started with a cleanup commit at 11:43, which cleared the ground. Then at 12:28, 3 commits span in 7 seconds. Traversality has arrived. Add thought, traversal, and lookup APIs. Expand MentisDB skill traversal guidance. So the skill file now tells the agent how to use the traversality. Move skill parsers tests into integration tests. Thoughts can now be addressed by stable ID, by index, by hash. You can ask for the genesis thought or the head thought. You could move forward and backward through the chain intentionally. And that is a big deal. Because once you can do that, you're not just storing memory, you're preserving sequence. You're preserving the order in which understanding unfolds. And that matters for replay, for debugging, for resumption, for forensics, and eventually for governance. And you bet your ass regulators are going to love MentisDB, and they're going to ask for stuff like this when we start seeing catastrophes caused by agents. So at 12:35 p.m., Vervo's login got defaulted to true on the daemon. Yeah, I was always wanting to see what my agents were thinking, so that was no longer something that you had to add as a parameter when you launch the daemon. It's by default. But then at 12:40, we also added file-backed integration logging, and we split it cleanly. We have an environment variable called MentisDB log file, in which you put the path to to where you want the logs to be. And this appends to disk. Even if you wanted to have the console quiet, you can have the file logging, which then at 12:46, the daemon config output was colorized. So we made those logs pretty. And then the entire sprint from cleanup to the last polish commit took only 63 minutes, a little bit over an hour. Then our agent Apollo, we asked for its retrospective thoughts, and we stored that in our own MentisDB chain. And Apollo really captured the spirit of the moment really well. Traversal anchors needed to be strongly typed. So we had ID, hash, index, genesis, and head being actual types. Missing anchors should not explode when the caller with errors. They should return empty pages and let interactions stay stable. No weird-ass crashes. It's solid. Time windows need strict semantics. So tests needed to live in integration files under tests. Yeah, we want to separate all of our tests to make our code easier to read and maintain. But also, once you have the tests elsewhere, you know that the public behavior of the API can be verified end-to-end. And that is the sound of a project tightening up. That is the sound of a project becoming trustworthy. So if day 1 was birth, and day 2 was continuity, and day 3 was expansion, then day 4 was clarity. So when I look back at these 4 days, I don't just see commits. I see the shape of a project that's revealing itself, that is discovering itself. And on March 11, 6:57 in the morning, the idea escaped the notebook and became standalone memory system. On March 12th, it gained versioning. At 11:39, a release at 12:19, and a new name at 2:14 p.m. On March 13, it moved beyond memory alone, and it shipped as 0.40 at 5:53 p.m. And on March 14, in 63 minutes between 11:43 a.m. and 12:46 p.m., it became inspectable, more navigable, and more operationally honest. And the reason I think this matters is that the original problem is not going away. As much as OpenAI wants to keep your ass within their agent, and they will provide for memory, they will try to use that as a moat. You need to own your memories. And this, I mean, if a blockchain is good enough to store the world's transactions for Bitcoin, it should be good enough to store memories. So agents will keep running into context limits, unless they kind of fake it. But context windows are a real thing. The agents will keep forgetting, unless you give them memory, and they will keep handing work to one another, that's for sure. And if we want those systems to become reliable, then memory cannot remain a hidden side effect inside a chat window or a bunch of files in a messy repository. It has to be durable, it has to be structured, it has to be inspectable, and eventually it has to become infrastructure that can scale. Think millions of agents writing to millions of thought chains, or a public thought chain being written by millions of agents doing research, and then having other agents research what's going on that chain and learning from all the other agents. Think of people selling their chains, selling their skilled databases, because they've spent millions of dollars to refine the memories and skills. So we've been dreaming a lot. We can't stop talking about this shit. And that's what these 4 days were really about. It's the moment thought chain started becoming MentisDB. And it's the moment a conversation about context collapse started turning into a real memory layer for agents. And I can't wait to tell you what I did over the weekend. It gets crazier.